So again, this will look different for everyone. It can be just breathing for a couple of minutes as you walk through a door. It can be the visualization, visualizing, yourself feeling calmer. Our brains don't know the difference, again, which is why us imagining something going bad can make us feel very, very, very stressed and anxious, even though that thing hasn't even happened yet. We can use that same kind of system to our benefit and visualize ourselves feeling calmer, safe, happy, succeeding. We can challenge self-critical thoughts. It's not our fault that we have these critical thoughts, thoughts that doubt ourselves, for example, and we don't have to accept them. And even just looking at our thoughts from a slightly more balanced perspective might be enough to help you to feel calmer and soothed. It can be recognizing something good in amongst everything that might feel terrible at that moment. Even thinking about the traits that you have that tend to help you to get through periods of stress and pressure. Maybe you, in the face of lots of pressure, you actually get really tunnel vision and focused, and you get really energized and you feel really determined. Maybe you're better at communicating more effectively in those high pressure moments. Maybe you think, even when this hasn't gone well, I've learned something there, and that's really useful. We can engage in gratitude, which again doesn't take a minute. Even on the worst day, we might think of one thing that we might feel grateful for. And again, just being present with that feeling for a few seconds can be enough to help start shift the way that we're feeling. So as much as we can't choose the fact that we sometimes have these emotions that we don't like, and that might influence the way that we think about ourselves, about a situation, that might influence the way that we behave, we're not totally powerless to this. And there are things that we can do that are very, very small that can actually have a really positive ripple effect. And the more often we do them, the better. And also aligning with your values, which we're about to touch on the benefits and the importance of. So just that kind of challenging self-critical thoughts, just as a couple of examples. If you are sat with the thought, I don't know what I'm doing, there's a good chance that you're going to feel anxious, stressed, on edge, for example, anticipating that this is going to be terrible. Even just noticing I'm having that thought and adding the word yet to the end of that might be enough to help you to feel a little bit calmer. There's a little bit of space there that this is going to change. And I don't know what I'm going to do yet. And at some point, that might evolve, that might pass, that might change. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. This isn't going as planned. I'm so stressed, I can't do this. Like we said, this is going to look very, very, very different for everyone. But just to kind of notice, there's going to be a very big difference between how you feel if you're running with these thoughts, I don't know how I'm going to do this, I don't know how I'll get through this, versus if you then also add on, and I always do. I'll find some way through it. And even if I don't, I'll be okay. I'll find a way to cope. This isn't going as planned, and yet I'll make it work. I'm so stressed, I can't do this. We can even look at the fact that we feel stressed differently. You can think, stress will help me to feel energized and help me to focus and help me to think clearly. And that might be a really, really useful thing. So even just shifting our perspective can be enough to help us to feel more grounded, think more clearly, and essentially take more purposeful action that longer term moves our life in a direction that works for us and is better for us, versus being very reactive in response to very strong feelings in the moment. So we want to start thinking about taking more mindful, considered actions that are better for us long term. So this leads us quite nicely then into values-based living. So goals are very, very important. We all know about the importance of goals and how beneficial they can be. And they're not faultless. Goals are brilliant, and they often defer our sense of achievement, of satisfaction, of pride. We anticipate how we're going to feel when we reach that goal, and the reality doesn't always live up to expectation. And maybe we have a feeling of real pride or achievement or reward, whatever it looks like. And that's also a temporary feeling that will dip and will pass. And then we might find ourselves feeling a little bit lost again. So values-based living is a real evidence-based protective factor that, again, will decrease the likelihood of us struggling with our mental health. Doesn't guarantee it, but we're trying to decrease the likelihood. So values are essentially principles that guide how we live our lives, which help us to make decisions. So they are brilliant for a multitude of reasons. They are constant. Yes, they might change slightly throughout the course of our lives, but they're much more predictable. and concrete than just goals, which change all the time. They help to create a sense of meaning and purpose. They create motivation. They help us to do things that are really difficult in the short term, because longer term, this is moving my life in a way that is going to work for me and that's going to be better and that's going to make me feel prouder, for example. They help us to respond in the moment in a way that is better for us longer term versus, again, being quite reactive. So many benefits to this. And one thing to just bear in mind here is often when we think about values, people think about areas of your life, like I value family, I value my career, and that is important, and it's useful to reflect now and then on how much time and energy and resources am I putting into those different areas, and is anything being neglected. But really, like I said, these guiding principles are a bit more specific than that. So for example, maybe you value honesty. Maybe you value loyalty. And again, when we think about values, it's not just about how we treat other people, but we need to extend these things for ourselves, inwards, essentially. Accountability, freedom, compassion, determination, independence. However this looks, it is just quite useful to be aware of what are my guiding principles to make your day-to-day life easier, to make you, if you're faced with big decisions, big overwhelming life circumstances, it helps you to navigate those a little bit better. So we'll send after this session like worksheets that help you work out what your values are and what the most important values are to you. And it'll only take like 10 minutes. It's really worth doing. But even just for now, it can be really useful to just take some time to reflect and think, for example, about who is it that you admire in life. It can be someone that you know personally. It can be, I don't know, a successful celebrity, known figure. But what is it that you admire about them? And when we think here about what you admire about them, not just thinking about, I really admire how that person came from nothing and they've gone on to win the Golden Globes or a BAFTA or whatever it is, and there's some sort of outcome. But what is it that I admire that I think they must have embodied to get there? So do I think they must have been extremely determined? They must have been really creative to be able to use what little resources they have to get to that point. Is it that I assume I admire the fact that I think they must have been continuously learning and just curious and always challenging themselves? Do I think they must have had to be really adaptable? Do I admire that they seem really independent or intelligent, for example? We can also ask ourselves questions like, at the minute, what 5 words would I like to be able to, would I currently use, to describe myself? So maybe you think, I'm determined and ambitious. And also, if you were to ask my kids and my partner, they might say I'm a bit moody and I can be a bit impatient. And I am caring, like I genuinely am caring. But on reflection, if what words would I like to be able to use? What words would I like other people to use to describe me? Whether that's also still determined and ambitious and caring, but maybe a bit more patient or a little bit calmer, for example. And what I love personally about the value stuff is it's not about who do I think I am? What do I think I've been like so far? What have other people told me I'm like as a person? But really about who do I want to be? What kind of person would I be proud of myself for being? When I'm 80, hopefully we live that long and we're lucky enough to live that long. What would I be proud of myself for having done in this moment? So it is, like we said, less about the outcomes and more about what is it that I would embody to feel like I am somebody who is determined. I am somebody who values humor, for example. So these are just some examples of traits. And again, they're not covering everything. We can also value materialism. That's okay. We can value status. That's okay. But so long as we know what our kind of core principles and values are, that does help us with kind of navigating, like I said, the day-to-day stuff, the bigger life challenges. And I would encourage you here to just take a moment and just notice if there's anything that stands out to you instinctively. Maybe there's 1 or 2 that absolutely, the second I saw empathy there, I know that's absolutely me. That's something that I really resonate with. Maybe there's something like honesty, and that's something that absolutely resonates with me. And again, we just encourage you to think about, of one of those things, what's something that I can do this week that would embody this? If I've got people in my team that are really struggling, and their behavior is not what I would typically expect, if I know I value curiosity, I'm going to be very mindful going into those discussions about how their performance has changed, I'm going to be very mindful about not going into those discussions with lots of assumptions about why they're behaving the way that they are and what I'm going to tell them that they have to do. I'm going to approach with a bit more of an open mind and see what it is that might be going on and what might be beneficial, essentially. So if, for example, you value patience, you can notice maybe if something's not being done as quickly as you would like and you're getting a little bit irritable with someone, you might notice, I'm running the risk here of getting a bit snappy. And maybe you take a deep breath because I know I want to be patient. Maybe you notice that you're being impatient with yourself and you recognize, actually, this thing is new to me. I'm doing my best here. And you be a bit more patient with yourself. If as a business, things aren't going as quickly as you would like, maybe I notice that I'm not being so patient right now and I can focus on what we're learning along the way, even if the outcome isn't where I want it to be yet. With bigger life decisions, if you know that you value determination, maybe when there's a tricky patch with the business and other people might consider exploring other options, actually what I'm going to explore here is gathering alternative perspectives, finding new ways of doing things, adapting as best as I can. If you know that you're determined and your work, because you're focusing so much in that domain, is impacting your relationships, maybe I focus that energy and attention a little bit on making sure that my relationships don't suffer because I'm also determined to make those survive this. Or, you need some sort of surgery or physio that's going to be uncomfortable and we would rather not go through. And I know that determination really matters to me. So I'm going to put myself through this temporary discomfort for the sake of my longer term benefits, essentially. So like we said, we'll send you some worksheets, but just as a little reflection, anything that jumped out to you immediately looking at that list, make a note of and just have that in mind for the rest of today. It doesn't guarantee that nothing will ever go wrong and that we'll never struggle. So even in spite of trying to meet your fundamental needs, even if you set the best boundaries in the world, even if you try to soothe more often, live in line with your values, we can still struggle. So if we notice those early warning signs and things are escalating a little bit, just a few little things to consider. First of all, it's absolutely not our fault that any of us struggle. Just fundamentally, it isn't. It can be very, very useful. As again, often when we're struggling, we tend to find that people withdraw, they pull away from people, they disconnect, they keep things to themselves. Even just small changes that are the opposite to what everything in our body's pushing us to do, like just connecting with people a bit more, can make a massive difference. Reflecting, what have I learned before? When I've experienced this feeling before, is there anything that helped? Can I think about trying to do that now? Is there anything that made this a lot worse so I can avoid experiencing that now? Can I strip it back and really adjust my expectations of myself at the minute to maybe I don't expect myself to be perfect and to cope perfectly all the time or to do everything and be everything to everyone. And if your employees do struggle, as will happen because they are people, just know that it's not your responsibility to fix them, to make everything better, to make them happy. Their emotions are also information. It can be more useful to just focus on understanding their perspective and asking, how can I help? And maybe that looks like supporting practically with problem solving, prioritizing, reducing their workplace stress. And that might also look like accepting that there are limits to your role and they might be better off getting support elsewhere. And we help with even just Googling that. But just being mindful that you as a leader, how you treat yourself does, intentionally or not, kind of set the tone for other people. If you're open about the fact that, yes, when things are difficult, I also feel stress, and that's okay. There are ways to manage that. And I'm going to go now spend 5 minutes calming down because that was really heavy. That normalizes experiencing challenges. It normalizes engaging proactively with things that will make the rest of the today better, the rest of the week better, my life better. How you behave will, intentionally or not, send messages to other people about what they think you expect from them. If you're sending emails at 11 o'clock at night, working at weekends, going in when you're not well, people might believe that you expect the same from them. So doing all of the things that work for you, not only for the benefit of you, but then for the benefit of your teams, which hopefully will make your life easier. We do like this quote to kind of conclude that nothing so conclusively proves a person's ability to lead others as what that person does from day to day to lead themselves.
On that. So yes. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.